Welcome to the Dragon's Library, your source for games, movies, shows, and more. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Dragon's Library. So today we are going back to Rachel Aaron with Minimum Wage Magic. So for those of you who don't know, I really got into this book series called the Heartstriker series by Rachel Aaron. And she made a secondary series called the DFZ series, which is sort of a spin-off of that series as well. It takes place in the same universe after the original series, with cameos from the main characters of her first series. I really like this series, and I really like the Heartstriker series, so I've been reviewing them. If you want to catch any of my Heartstrikers reviews, I will have them in the description. You don't really need to. This is a book that you can kind of get into, even without knowledge of a previous series. I'm going to try and review it without referencing Heartstrikers as much as possible in the non-review section. I will be talking about a decent amount of the spoiler section, so spoiler section, you've been warned for that area. Alright, so let's get into the review. So, the Minimum Wage Magic starts out in the DFZ. Now, for those of you who don't know about the Heartstriker series, the DFZ is the Detroit Free Zone. Magic came back like a century ago at this point, in 2030. Well, yeah, like 2030, Magic came back. And the spirits of the land all rose up. One of them, called Algonquin, Spirit of the Great Lakes, destroyed Detroit and then rebuilt it as sort of like this cyberpunk city. The default cyberpunk city. Giant skyscrapers, skyways, and the civil class problem of the dirty, evil, drug-ruled, like drugs and vending machines, guns and vending machines on every street. City where there are no laws, essentially. And it's called the Detroit Free Zone because Algonquin basically only had like a handful of laws. The basic, you're not allowed to steal, you're not allowed to break contracts, and you're not allowed to pollute my lakes. That last one was enforced a lot more than the others. The other one was no dragons, although by the time of the DFZ, that's changed. Anyway, there was another event, which they don't go into too depth, but that was the conclusion of the last book series. And when that happened, the old gods raise up. So there are a lot of different types of spirits. There are animal spirits, which are embodiments of, when a species hits a certain population, there's a spirit that's created of that species. And then, except for humans, because we have mortal spirits. Now, Algonquin was a spirit of the land. She was formed from lakes. But mortal spirits, unlike animal and land spirits, are formed from human concepts. See, humans in Rachel Aaron's world are able to move magic. It's what makes us different from other animals. So, subconsciously, all humans can move magic, but only mages can move it consciously, which used to be 10%, now it's like 30% of the population. After a rise in magical levels, last book, I'm not going to talk about it too much. It's actually not that important. Basically, all you really need to know is that Algonquin was trying to create her own artificial god, and that's why she created the DFZ. So she created the spirit of the DFZ, literally the god of the city. And now that she's up and about, she is the city. She's the human embodiment of the city. What we think of when we think of the DFZ. The city with no rules, where anything's possible, where anybody can make a fresh start. And so she's now alive. As a result, the DFZ, especially due to the fact that the DFZ was a city of magic even before the DFZ spirit rose, she's a lot more active than other city spirits, so her city literally moves around, like buildings constantly moving, skyways and highways shifting around. The way they describe it is just really cool. Like, the idea of living in a city that's also alive and is, like, you don't pay rent to your, most people don't pay rent to a landlord. They pay rent to the city. And if you, fail to pay up on your rent, well, the city takes back your apartment and everything in it is now hers. You get kicked out. Literally, the locks change automatically and your stuff is auctioned off. Since she doesn't really want all this stuff, she just wants money. DFC is pretty practical. So, there are cleaners. And cleaners are basically people who buy apartments, derelict ones who fall behind their rent. They go and auction for them and they bid on them. The winner has to clean it, bring it up to livable standards, get all the dirt, dead bodies out, because this is the DFZ. But the catch is, you are now the owner of all the property inside of it. Now, you have to clean it before the rent is due, otherwise you'll have to pay rent that month, because again, we're on a time schedule here, people. But it's a business where if you have an eye for what's valuable and you can get information, if you're very good at, processing the information and essentially treasure hunting, you can get some really good stuff. You sell that stuff off, and if you make a profit, that's how you tell you're doing well. This brings us into Opal Young. She's in the middle of a job when we first meet her, and she is a cleaner in the DFZ. She's run into a bit of bad luck lately and has bid on this new apartment in hopes of finding something good. It's down in the middle depths of the DFZ, like deep, deep below the ground, and she finds a dead body inside. Now that means she can't really salvage it because that means he's not behind his rent. He was just dead, which means, they've got to contact the next of kin. However, this guy's a little weird. There's a lot of stuff in his apartment, and the broker doesn't really want to give her a refund because it'll break his no refund policy. So he says, look, how about this? I'll give you like 50% back. You can keep the stuff. This guy was like in the middle of nowhere, clearly hiding out for something. There's not going to be any next of kin. So you can help yourself to the apartment and I'll repost it. No refund necessary. That'll be your refund. You get to take whatever's first. We'll mark it off as a ransacked apartment. Because Broker is a slimy piece of work. I really love the voice acting for him. She goes digging inside and finds some weird notes. Not worth much. She brings them to a friend. And this starts her down a rabbit hole of trying to figure out the mystery of what happened to this guy and if she can get some money out of it. Because, she's desperately in need of money to pay off some debt. It's all very hush-hush at first. She's trying to basically buy her freedom. Part of some plan to finally get free of her dad. There's more to it than that, like a lot, but I'm not going to spoil it. She also attracts the attention of another cleaner called Nicholas Koss, who is a bit shady, but he doesn't want her dead. And when he saves her from being murdered by someone, when she checks out another job that was related to that strange house she found, the two of them decide to team up. 50-50, split the reward. And there's apparently some massive payload. People are interested. Some shady stuff's going down. Interplot. Now, I really like this one. For those of you who have read Rachel Aaron's other stuff, it really gets down to what I liked about the first Heartstrikers books, Nice Dragon Finished Last. It's two down-on-the-luck people in the city where anything's possible, magic abounding, magical creatures and monsters, dragons in the sky, gods now prowling the earth. The world is just so rich, and I love the way she describes the DFZ. Like, this is a kind of magical city that you're just gonna be like, wow, I wish that was a real place I could visit. And they spend almost as much time on the city itself as they do on the characters, defining this, place where anything can happen. And it really does come alive. The setting is definitely the strongest part in these books. I also like Opal Young as a character. She has an AI she talks to, so there's a lot of commentary even when she's on her own. And when she teams up with Nick, their personalities play off each other pretty well. Especially since he's the practical, with a few niche hobbies kind of guy, and she's the art major, treasure hunter kind of girl with magic. I also enjoy that, in contrast to Rachel Aaron's previous mage character, Marcy, Opal is kind of the anti-Marcy. See, Marcy was a thaumaturge, and she was a really, really good thaumaturge. She could handle a decent amount of magic, without going insane, but her main thing was control and intellect. She was always able to outthink the bigger creatures around her. And even when she got power, she was always the brains, you know what I mean? When it came to magic, Marcy was the intelligent super genius, and even Amelia, a millennia-old planeswalking dragon, was often impressed by how intelligent Marcy was. She's even the archmage of literally the entire world at this point, in the book series, although we don't see her personally. In contrast, Opal is able to draw in huge amounts of magic, like literally the human limit. But she can't control it at all. She's garbage at thaumaturge, and she has to worry about every spell she casts backlashing. Her favorite thing is to literally just shape magic into a crowbar, and even then she has to worry about it snapping in her face. So she's a mage, and she can use magic, but she's sort of like a glass cannon. She can fire, but she's gonna crack. And she cracks hard in this, pushing herself well past the limit. But she's also different in other ways. While she's not, super interested in magic, she is a big old, magical art history kind of person. She actually went to a fancy college, and it's mentioned multiple times, and she uses that expertise both in the fancy college landscape to know what apartments are garbage and a lot of fake painting and stuff like that. But she also uses her art degree and her experience with her rich father to help identify items of value. That's why she's such a good cleaner. She's really good at picking out what homes will have good stuff in them. And they really get that across, that she's intelligent like Marcy, but in a different way. Which I like, because I feel like if they just done Marcy again, some really good thaumaturge and stuff like that, it would have been kind of boring. In fact, later on in the series, I'm going to get to that eventually, they even use her as a foil to show a lot of Marcy's flaws. Because, turns out, Rachel Aaron wrote more complex characters. They weren't perfect. They all had flaws, and you actually get to see one of Marcy's major flaws because it actually comes back to haunt our new main character, Opal Young. I'm not going to spoil what that is for the next 2 books for when I review them, but it was very interesting, and I just thought it was worth mentioning here. All in all, I think this series actually shows some marked improvement over her previous series. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Julius, Marcy, Bob, I loved Estella as a villain, I loved all of that stuff, but the city was always the focus of these books, and outside of the first 2, we just didn't have enough of the city. Like, they went to the DFZ in every book, just outright. But in the 3rd and 4th books, they only went there near the end for the final climax, and in the 5th book, it was the final battle, and it felt less like we were in the city, because none of the people were in the city. In fact, for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th books, all the citizens were removed from the city, so it wasn't really the DFZ anymore. They even mentioned that, how the DFZ is without her soul. The people were the city. So I like that we're back in this city with all the people going about their lives, and we're just following 2 people trying to, catch a break, finally, in the city where you can start over. Opal was a wonderful new character, great fresh of air. I loved Sybil as the snarky AI, constantly, communicating with her. Nick was the stoic badass, but he also had a bit more complexity to him. He knew these streets, and he was really trying to run away from something. There's a bit more to it, because the story is a bit darker than these usually get, but I actually love what they did with him there. Like, he has all these weird, overly cautious habits, but when you find out why he has them, you're going to be like, oh wow, that's actually completely reasonable. You actually want to be more careful, Nick. There are a few things you might have missed here or there. It's just like, I just love Rachel Aaron's work. Her stuff always just makes me so happy. Really. This is an easy 9 out of 10 for me. It's a straight up mystery treasure hunt caper. I love the characters. I love the theme. I love this world. So yeah. I'll give this a 9 out of 10 and move on to the spoiler section. Hope you guys enjoyed this. If you guys don't want any spoilers, you want to read this fresh, and I do actually recommend it. It's a very good read. Or you can find it on Audible. I have links to both the physical book and audio book. Both of them are on Amazon and Audible respectively. You can just find that in the link. So yeah, you will also find a link to all of my previous reviews for this series. Hope you enjoy it. Alright, on to the spoiler section. Okay, now to get into the good stuff. So, I'm going to get a bit more into the Heartstrikers explanation here. If you want to skip over that, yeah, I'll put timestamps on this video, video if you're watching YouTube, podcast if you're watching on my podcast. I'll put a little timestamps, let you know when you can skip to the good stuff. So, Heartstrikers background, here we go. So, at the end of the first at the end of the final Heartstrikers book, Marcy's become the Archmage and is reestablishing the Council of Merlins. The human gods have now risen and been given their form again. So mortal spirits that are basically gods. Julius has become the Dragon of Detroit and sort of basically acts as a intermediary so dragons can meet on neutral territory to discuss their grievances without worry about being literally stabbed in the back, because dragons are a bit, treacherous in this world. That's putting it lightly. And the DFZ is now a living city, who really only tolerates a handful of people, namely like Marcy, kind of Myron Rollins, Julius, and a handful of other people. But, you know what? This world was just a breeze to get back into. So, after everything that happened, Julius made a few rules. Now, they're called the Peacemakers Edict, and they're basically a set of rules that you don't break. Marcy began There have been a few changes in the world. For example, Marcy instituted thaumaturgy as the officially endorsed, Archmage endorsed form of magic, which means other schools like shamanism, which was declared, which Marcy often painted as dangerous, reckless, and for people who don't understand what they're doing, basically made in the third book. There's someone who says she made the rest of us look like quacks, because she's the Archmage. Everybody listens to her. But yeah, so there have been a lot of changes. One of them is that, what is it called? Cockatrices are now illegal to sell. That will become important later. Anyway, these aren't really laws, but everyone knows you don't cross the Peacemaker, who is like the figurehead of the largest dragon alliance in the world, so they're basically laws. The DFZ doesn't really do laws, so when she needs a law made, she goes to, Julius and has an unofficial edict laid down. So we get back to Opal Young. Before that, we have a few more changes to go over. I do want to comment on a few things here. The world building in this is really good. See, the world's changed a lot since the last Heartstriker book. The gods have risen. They're alive again. This is no longer a world where a lake spirit is your biggest problem. There are literal faces of death wandering about the world. And there are actual consequences of that. For example, the DFZ has had to undergo radical shifts because the city's constantly moving and evolving, so a lot of the traffic apps will have to account. So it's basically impossible to drive normally there. You need to be auto-driving because you have to have a computer to adapt to the constantly changing world, which fits for a city of progress. Makes sense. There are also in addition to that, raiding dead bodies has become a big no-no. Like, as in, you do not rob corpses. It's something only suicidally insane people do. Which is really cool, actually. Because, yeah, of course you don't want to rob a corpse. Even if it's some random nobody, that means it's the property, the spirit of the forgotten dead, the empty wind, ghost. One of the characters from the first show. He will rip you a new one if you try and steal for a dead body. Like, that actually happens to these characters, because they have to get this robot arm from the professor they are looking for. I'll get into it later. And Nick is like, and Opal's like, this is a really bad idea. So Nick was like, look, it'll be fine. We'll just get the arm and get out. And they nearly get murdered, and Opal has to beg him and tell him, hey, we're trying to complete his research. Figure out what happened. Please, just ask him what he wanted. And it's only because that guy is like, I'd rather you find it than the people who are people who I was hiding from, that they're even allowed to leave alive. Which is just really interesting. I just enjoy it a lot. It's great. Alright, so let's get on to the main plot now that I've gone over some differences and changes. I just really want to talk about that because I love the way Rachel Aaron weaves her magic system into our world. And I just always enjoyed the concept of the DFZ, this place built on a graveyard destroyed by a spirit, now becoming a living city where anything is possible. It's just beautiful. Okay, so, background on Opal Young. Opal is a dragon's daughter. Now, before you go wait, she's a hybrid or something? No. She's human. Her mother is, so her father is the Dragon of Korea. Her adopted father, anyway. And her mother was Young of Korea's favorite mortal. Like Amelia, he tends to keep mortals like pets. He prefers the very pretty, very useful ones rather than powerful mages like Amelia. But yeah, he's, often called Amelia even mentions in one of the other books, yeah, he, all the humans he has, it's basically the dragon equivalent of being a crazy cat lady. Because he doesn't really trust any other dragons. His clan consists of only himself. He killed his father and drove his sister out of his kingdom, and basically rules over Korea now. From what I've seen, he seems to rule over South Korea and may or may not have destroyed North Korea, which is, pretty nice. Like that a lot. It's just implied because they go to Seoul, so obviously that means it's been dealt with, and they seem to have a South Korean heritage, so I like the idea that North Korea no longer exists in this universe. Plus side, even with death gods roaming about, this seems like a better place to live. But, anyway. So, he named her Opal because she was a pretty gem of very little value. He often times called her an ugly puppy because while she's not, like, horribly looking compared to Young's mortals, who are, like, all supermodels, she was always the odd little ugly duckling out. When she was younger, he used to dote on her, and she did so to a certain extent, but Opal never really had a life of her own. Her entire life was literally, from the moment she was born, serving a dragon. And she got sick of it. When she realized she was nothing more than a thing to be owned to him, she decided to start plotting her escape. Now, her mother had literally had her, like, test tube baby style with other mages with increased, with high, other mortals with desirable traits genetically modified to be a super mage, which didn't turn out well. Yeah, she could handle large amounts of magic, even from a really, really young age, but she quickly turned out to not really have much of a talent in magic. For those of you who have read later books, yes, I know about that. That's not this book. So, she was quickly, seen as sort of a failure. Like, he spent all this money to make a super mage. Basically, Young wanted her mother, but with magic. The best magic. And that didn't really turn out. She didn't really resemble her mother that much, and she also wasn't a super mage, so kind of double fail. And Opal took it pretty hard. She hates him, kind of, a lot. Like, he's still her father, but she's just so sick of being the child of Young of Korea. She just wants him gone. So she came up with a scheme. She had researched high-paying jobs and figured out places that her father wouldn't follow her to. Eventually, she realized she could go to a special art college in the DFZ. Now, Young does not like the Peacemakers Accord. He's not a part of the Peacemakers Alliance, Julius's big old dragon alliance with all the major clans. He's one of the last holdouts. And so, he's not technically allowed in the DFZ unless he's negotiating. Basically, he has to operate under the rules and doesn't get all the benefits of being part of the alliance there. However, since he did want, Opal basically managed to convince him that this was the best school for this, and that she could basically help, run his treasury. And he's a dragon, he can respect that. So, obviously, he sent her there, because his daughter could only have the best. Dragons are very stuck up like that, and she took advantage of it. And she made sure he thought she was just partying away. That this was literally just, I'm going to college for a few years and I'll come right back home and start serving you again, my dragon. However, she had a plan. See, she scoped out a really good high-paying job in the city, being a cleaner. She even did a few trial runs with it so she could know for a fact she could make decent money with it. Now, in addition to this, she scoped out less well-paying jobs, and played ignorant about how much money the school cost her. Eventually lining up some internships with museums and stuff like that with low pay. And when the time came for her father to pick him up, she caught him in a deal. See, she was sick of being there. She just wanted to leave. And she, dropped that on him. She said, I'm willing to make a deal with you. If you let me pay off the debt I owe you for my college tuition, I'm free to go. On my own, forever. If I can't make my payments to you, I'll go home. And I will never attempt to leave again. And he accepted, because he did his research, but from all his research, she was a new college graduate with no idea how much money she actually owed, who was signed up for an internship at a museum, of all things. She would never be able to pay the money back. Well then, all of a sudden, she made the first payment. And he realized she was doing cleaner. But Young of Korea is known for being a very honorable dragon, who would never go back on his word. And if he tried to go back on his word with her, she would broadcast to the whole world and he would lose face. He couldn't accept that. His pride couldn't handle that. She played him. And that's what Opal understands dragons, like, really well. She understands how to play her father in very good ways. Like, that's a very complex plan. She spent years on this as a kid, working and scheming. I mean, she was raised by a dragon, after all. Scheming is what they're good at. And she out-schemed a 1,000-year-old dragon, which is, just impressive on, 20 different levels. However, the last few months have not gone well. She's lost lots of money. Every she's run into has been a bust, and she doesn't know what to do. Finally, she finds the apartment of Dr. Lyle and finds strange notes after broker gives her, all the stuff as like recomp before they resell the apartment again as broken into. That he was working on some weird ritual. So she takes it to a friend of hers and she says, "Yeah, it seems to be a ritual for creating cockatrice eggs. Cockatrices are basically non-existent. They require very specific circumstances with toads and environmental factors in order to be born." And so there are so few of them. In addition, the spirit of cockatrices is friends with the Archmage, Marcy, Marcy Navali. So she got Julius, her husband, to declare a Peacemakers Edict, making the sale of cockatrice eggs illegal. The only people who have them are people on, private environmental reclamation reserves. The people who won't sell them. But apparently they're also very valuable as entertainment pieces in, arena dogfight stuff. Crazy valuable there. But again, there are so few of them that just there's none to buy. Doesn't matter how much money you have. But unfortunately, this ritual is so archaic and requires so many expensive things that cockatrice eggs as magical ingredients just aren't that valuable. Not to this level. Unless you're creating, hundreds of them. So she thinks it's a bit of a bust. But when she goes back to the broker, she realizes that one of the houses up for sale is that same professor's house. So she goes there. And while she manages to find a few things using a tracking spell with the papers as the focal point. However, afterwards, she's attacked by several mercenaries who eventually tell her, after Nick shows up and beats them up, that they were hired to spy on the house and attack anyone who found anything or snooped around too much and take whatever they had found. Now, if somebody's willing to hire hitmen to murder and steal from people in the living city, there's gotta be something valuable here. Nick figures that as well and asks for 50%. In exchange, he'll protect her. So, they go through it, slowly learning more about themselves. She finds out Nick has this, is very strange by modern standards, which I love the small little world building details they give for her. For example, they get in Nick's car briefly, and Nick, and she sees, Nick reaching for the stick, and she's like, "Oh, that's nice." What do you mean? It's fake, right? It's no, this is a real car with gasoline. She's like, "We're in a metal box that moves by explosions without auto nav." She's terrified. And she starts risking off. Yeah, 90% of all traffic accidents were caused by human error. We're gonna die in this thing. They used to account for half of all deaths or something like that. Humans don't drive cars anymore. Our cars drive ourselves. It's wonderful. I love that. That moment where she realizes she's in a car being driven by a human being in a city whose streets move. It's yeah, I'd be justifiably terrified as well. And it's just it's a glimpse into a future for me. I feel like Rachel Aaron really nailed a lot of things for the future, AR devices becoming big and auto drive cars becoming the norm. We saw from Marcy's car back in there that a lot of older cars still had windshields that you could see through and you could drive them for short distances before the auto nav kicked in. But everyone used the auto nav, and they're all electric cars. Being in something with gasoline, Marcy even asked, "How on earth do you buy gasoline?" It's it's not that bad. Nobody uses it anymore, so it's actually pretty cheap. It's you're driving in a metal box powered by explosions. We're gonna die. It's beautiful. I love that scene so much. I had to gush about it. It's just subtle world building and nice comedy. Good old Rachel Aaron stuff. But as they go, they eventually figure out that Dr. Lyle stashed a very large number of cockatrice eggs somewhere beneath the city. They use his arm, bring it by this cyberpunk, implant person Nick knows because he gets all his implants from her. They get the arm fixed up, and it turns out it's this sort of compass that leads them there. While all this is going on, they get visited by this man Kaufman, who works for this scary, crime lord, and offers Opal $500,000 for the information she's found. Now, at this point, they hadn't even found the arm yet. They didn't even know all this information was worth a damn. And heck, even if they did, they had already taken the information themselves, so they could have still found it without it. But she says no. Because if he's willing to pay her $500,000 for this right here, just the potential to find it, this stuff must be worth a fortune. And it is. They end up figuring out the compass is constantly moving around, but it's pointing to some place called the Gnarls, which is sort of where the metaphysical idea of the DFZ, the spirit itself in the realm of magic, meets the physical world. It's sort of a constantly shifting void filled with debris and pieces of the city she's pulled down. It's constantly shifting and basically impossible to find unless you have left a compass. The arm points to wherever the magic ritual site is, so you can always find it. So they go down there, Opal having to give the last of her money in order to open a door, which you have to pay with whatever you can. Which is very on brand for the DFZ. You know, you've got everyone has their own price and their own risk in order to win the big prize. You know, the city where you can give your all and you can make yourself anew. They also meet Nobody, one of the DFZ's priests or mages who basically give themselves over in eternal devotion to the spirit and get a lot of nice little benefits, sometimes even pseudo-immortality out of the deal. I'd probably try and serve a spirit if I lived there too. Living forever sounds nice. Even if you had to be a part of, a concept like a city. But yeah. So they go down to the Gnarls, face off with Kaufman, and they eventually figure out what Dr. Lyle was hiding. It wasn't just cockatrice eggs. When they open the seal, it breaks a magical hibernation spell that was put in place. And the eggs start hatching. This wasn't like infertile cockatrice eggs created using alchemy. This was fertile cockatrice eggs. Kaufman, at this point now tied up, even offhandedly remarks that they probably just doubled the world's population of cockatrices with these eggs. And he offers to pay them $6 million so they can fight to the death in the arena with them. They want to use them in basically dogfighting because, according to his words, they're powerful, violent, intelligent, and compassionate. They feel. They're nearly as intelligent as humans and with almost human-level empathy and understanding of emotions. When they die, the others mourn. And the arena eats it up. The arena is basically a death arena for, literal fights to the death and fights between animals that exist in the DFZ. Because, yeah, it's a city of progress, but it's also a city where no laws stop horrible stuff like that from happening. However, thanks to the Peacemakers Edict, and the fact there just aren't any cockatrices, there's no one where to buy them. So they had Dr. Lyle make them some. Unfortunately, he gained a conscience near the end once he realized what they were doing. He was basically just a mage obsessed with creating life through alchemy, but then he realized what he had done. He had made living things, and he was about to give them to someone who was going to use them to fight to the death in an arena. So he hid them, fled, and died of natural causes before he was able to get them out of the city. That's when Opal found him a month later. And Nick wants to accept the deal. And Opal should too. The money she'd get from it would pay off her debt and finance a brand new life of luxury and comfort. She wouldn't have to worry about food or anything like that, or even her father ever again. She could just go forward, living her best life, and making a new life for herself in this city. Finally. But she decides not to. She's been helped by Dr. Lyle through the empty wind multiple times now, and she understands she can't just go back on her promise to him. She promised she'd get them safe. And that this was just wrong. Opal wants the money a lot. She needs it in order to pay back her father. But she can't. Not like this. Eventually, she convinces Nick that this would just be wrong. And it's actually revealed that Nick used to fight in the arena. The game master is the one pulling Kaufman's strings. And he and Nick had a history. And when Nick realizes that he's about to sell them to that sadistic asshole, he hesitates. And he says no. Even though the money would finally let him get free of his past. Just like Opal. This is a chance to start anew. But it's not worth. He even mentions, I've made that deal before. Sold my soul to get just a bit further. It was never worth it. He's angry with himself, angry with the situation, that he had a brand new life sitting in front of him with no worries. Finally, he could put it all behind him. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. Because if he did it, he'd be doing exactly what he was running away from the whole time. Ugh, I love that moment. That moment where Nick is just angry. Not with the Opal or the or himself or even the cockatrices or even Kaufman. He's just angry that he finally saw the end of this journey. He finally saw freedom, only to have it snatched away because he couldn't bring himself to commit that final horrible act. And yeah, it's really touching. That moment is really touching. So they decide to call the Peacemakers, Dragon Consulate, and they're able to open a path to the Nara with the DFZ's help and escort the cockatrices out. Dr. Lyle and the Empty Wind thank them. Opal returns the arm to the Empty Wind, and she goes to face her father because time's up. She has no money. She's literally broke, and she goes to face him, knowing that even if she's going to go back to Korea, she'll find another way. She'll escape. She will. She has to. But she lost this time. However, Nick doesn't want them both to lose tonight. So he transfers enough money for her to pay off her next debt. And she does it, literally seconds before it's due, handing it to her father. And he's pissed. Of course, she's also pissed because while she was down in the Gnarls and one of the dragons who came to pick it up, a Heartstriker, asked her why she had a dragon curse on her. Turns out her bad luck wasn't actually her skills. She's, actually really freaking good at what she was doing because she'd been doing it for like 6 months at this point. No. Oh, see, the Chinese and Asian dragon clans had a mild talent for fortune magic. Now, the Golden Empire fused their clan's fortune magic into the Qilin, dragon of good fortune. But it's implied that most of the other Asian dragons do have a sort of natural inclination for fortune magic. The manipulation of probability. Young of Korea put a bad luck curse on her. Specifically bad luck with money. To not get her injured or anything like that. Essentially, she's unable to effectively make a profit without losing 50% of that profit at minimum, or losing 50% of what she put in. Essentially, even if she makes money, she makes way less money. But Nick has given her the money free of charge. Not as a render for service, she gave it to her. And she tells her dad that she's gonna find a way around his curse. She's gonna pay him back and she's never gonna see him again. Now he's angry at her. Her mom is constantly telling her to come back, but she's refusing. She's gonna do this. And her and Nick decide to team up. They made a pretty good team here, and she can't exactly handle money on her own, so they figure maybe if Nick's doing the buying and she's doing the, info, maybe they'll be able to make a profit together. Besides, once they get the curse off her, Nick's seen what she can do. The two of them put together, they will sweep bank. And that's how it ends. Kind of uplifting, hope they do better for the future. Yeah, they passed up on the chance to finally set themselves free, but they're still here, they've still got a fighting chance, and they're gonna make this work. I like it. I like both them together. All three of the main characters, Sybil, Opal, and Nick, all play off each other incredibly well, although Opal mostly plays off with Sybil on her own, because Nick doesn't really hear her that much, or he mostly gets her comments from Opal, but he has this weird, I never trust AIs with her, which is all nice. And all in all, I really like it. Opal's main conflict with her parents being that they just don't understand her. Like, midway through, her mom buys her all this new clothing and stuff like that, and it's literally all this, ridiculously fancy stuff that she can't even probably wear in her job. And, literally everything she hates. And it's just like, no, now tell me how much you love it. And it's like, I don't love any of this. You don't know me. You just know what you want me to be. And I really like that tension with her parents. Her father is the all-demanding dragon who expects her to be, one of his pet mortals. Her mom is like, well, this is what you should like, dear. It's so much better than those horrible things you like. When she, replaces her room, I forget it's in the first or second book. It's interesting. I like the dynamic between all the characters, basically. I loved the cameo by Ghost, The Empty Wind. I liked how they had a sort of Julius Ex Machina to come get the cockatrices. Julius actually has a cameo in the next book, and I can't wait to talk about that, because it's just, like, so good. I love Julius's scene in the next book. Now, it is weird how they have a new voice actor for these series, and I'm going to get more into that in the next review, but it is a little off-putting sometimes when you run into a named character. We only ran into Ghost, and he has this really deep, creepy voice, so it wasn't that different, but it is something to note. All in all, I loved this book. I thought the plot was just fantastic. They had a lot of themes about, what you're willing to do in order to get free, what being free means to each, both Nick and Opal. The money is essentially a means to an end. It's not, they don't just want money to be rich. They want money because to Nick, it's a way to finally have enough money to never have to worry about his past again. I'm going to get more into that in the second and third book when we learn about that. To Opal, it's a chance to finally be free of her father, to not have to deal with, dragon nonsense in her life, something she's had to deal with ever since she was a child. Which is interesting, and the nobody, the priest in, like, the temple that leads to the Gnarls even mentioned that to him. It's like, you're not just after money, dear. Money is just a means to an ends. I serve a city of capitalism. I should know a thing or two about that. It's just like, I love those subtle nuances. Because, yeah, they're not just here to get rich. They're here to get free. I know I've said that like 10 times now. All in all, I do like it. Especially since they hint towards the relationship between Opal and her parents being something that's going to have to build on. I love how it turns out in the third book, and I cannot wait to talk about that with you guys. But this review has been going a bit long, so I will see you guys next time. We will be reviewing the new movie Moonfall. I'm going to see that soon, on Thursday. Hopefully next week, I will be able to finish up Pokemon Legends Arceus. I've already started on it, and hopefully I'll be able to review that then. And after that, we've got even more stuff coming up, because there's a lot of things in the future. Horizon Forbidden West, all sorts of good things. My PS5 should be in any day now, so looking forward to all of that. See you guys next time. Bye. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode, and thank you for listening to The Dragon's Library. Please subscribe to this podcast to be notified of new episodes. The Dragon's Library releases new episodes Tuesday and Friday each week, and you can follow us on Twitter at dragon_library2. If you want to suggest an episode topic, my email is in the description below. And as always, thank you so much for all your support.